I'm here this afternoon with Adam B. Coleman. Adam is a conservative author and public speaker. He founded a publishing company, Wrong Speak Publishing. He has written a book, Black Victim to Black Victor, and he has been a guest on Newsmax and Fox News and had opinion pieces published in the New York Post. So Adam, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm honored that you would take the time to visit with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give us a little bit of background. Where are you from?
Sure. It sounds like a simple question, but it's always like a weird question for me.
Okay.
It's because I've lived in 5 states.
Okay.
But I was born in Detroit. I lived there, for the first 5 years of my life. But I usually tell people that I am from New Jersey because I've lived in New Jersey the longest. So yeah, I'm mainly from Central Jersey, but I've lived in various parts of New Jersey.
Now, you recently quit a job in order to write and speak full time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm taking the plunge. There might be actually it was so after I wrote that piece talking about my jump, there may actually be opportunity for me to have, just a small amount of side income, still doing the work that I was doing prior, but having way more flexibility. So, it actually make for a nice transition in the long term. But yeah, I'm basically taking the plunge to write full time, write for multiple publications, as well as expand on Wrong Speak as far as book publications for other people, as well as continue to write my second book, which I had stopped doing because I just didn't have enough time. I had too many distractions. So I plan to pick up all that stuff, and just take advantage of all the opportunities come my way and connect with people. And even more so, I'm looking forward to speaking more. I'm trying to get more opportunities to speak publicly, especially for schools. I would love to do speaking engagements at schools to tailor my message for children, especially I would say like high school age. But universities, if I can get the opportunity to speak. I know you introduced me as a conservative author, but I think my message is appealing to most people. I am a middle of the road independent, and I think most people agree with my general premise of most of what I'm saying as far as the importance of family. And it goes for either political spectrum. So I think the message that I'm trying to project is a universal message, and I want to do my best to spread that message via the book and also via my voice and push that dialogue out into the masses.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the clarification. You write quite a bit on Substack, is that correct?
Yeah, so the Substack venture is relatively new. I just started it, I want to say about a month ago, but what I ended up doing was basically I had Wrong Speak. Wrong Speak started off as a blogging platform, but what I did was basically take all my writings that were on Wrong Speak and put it into my Substack so people can read my old writings and kind of see my progression in writings. So there's a lot that's there because I've been writing for well over a year. So it looks like the Substack has actually been around longer than it actually has. It's just that my writings are basically imported from another place. But I have a lot that's written there. And also recently, while I was transferring all of my writings from there, I transferred everybody else's writings who was on Wrong Speak's website over to Substack as well. So I now have Wrong Speak on Substack and my own personal Substack.
Okay. What is the give us the URLs for both of those.
Yeah, so very easy, adambcoleman.substack.com, and the wrong speak is wrongspeak.substack.com.
Good. I'm sure that our listeners would love to access those and get to know you much deeper than we will have time to do today. You mentioned that family is a big item for you. Did I hear that correctly?
Absolutely. Part of the reason why is because of my childhood. I grew up without my father. I basically grew up with my sister and my mother, and I didn't really have any male role models, personal male role models around me. And much of my early life was struggling to become a man and understand what manhood is and what it looks like. And it took me a long time. And I know it's because I didn't have a healthy father figure in my life to kind of steer me in the right direction in life, to fill in those gaps, to keep me from being lost in the world. So I'm very passionate about it. And after writing the book, I want to speak out about it, and I use my personal story as an example. And sometimes people who are close to something are the best people to kind of talk about it. And there's not a lot of people who are in my circumstance who are willing to be critical of that situation in a public way for a variety of reasons. One of them is criticizing single parenthood comes off as criticizing the mothers, or like negatively criticizing them. I believe that there is fair criticism that could be levied upon the absent father and the mother who chooses that type of man in some of the cases, not in every case. And also, just to clarify, when I talk about single parenthood, I'm primarily talking about women who had children and were never married. So I'm not necessarily talking about divorcees, but the principle as far as the necessity for children to have both parents is, equally important.
You said this is sometimes a rather unpopular topic to address. Is that where the name of your publishing company came from? Wrong Speak Publishing?
Wrong speak was like purposely Orwellian, but the other part is it's weird because I don't feel that it's controversial. And I think that's the whole point. Like, you think something like wrong speak would be filled with, crazy kind of dialogues and things like that. But we're having intellectual conversations or critiques about certain things within our society, and we're being very rational about it. So that it's not hyper rhetorical or, filled with buzzwords or anything like that. It's just people just saying how they feel, and they're just normal people, just like myself. And I tried to stay away from being heavily biased and heavily one-sided or anything like that. I'm making arguments because I'm making a common sense argument. Or if I am biased about something, I'm admitting that I'm a biased party about it. But here's how it makes sense to me, and I'm giving my arguments. So yeah, wrong speak. It's purposefully contradictory because much of what we're saying is not really wrong.
You identified earlier as a middle of the road, independent, moderate, if I heard you correctly.
Yes.
You seem to be invited to some platforms that would generally be considered conservative. You've been on Fox News, you've been on Newsmax, you have written for the New York Post. I'm curious what kind of contacts you've had, invitations to appear on what would generally be considered liberal platforms and publications.
None. Zero. To write, to appear, zero. And I think, well, and to add one thing, I don't steer away from the conservative thing. So I do see myself as socially conservative. my belief in the nuclear family, my belief in being pro-life, you know, those are areas where I'm wholly socially conservative on. So I don't steer away from it. But I sometimes what happens is you say conservative and people automatically assume that you're a Republican. So I've never voted for a Republican. I'm likely to vote for a Republican this November for the first time. But I am an independent, and I'm purposely an independent. So to go back to what you were saying, has anybody invited me? No. Um, and that shows you what's actually happening within our media. As someone who used to be a liberal and someone used to be a Democrat, the principle of freedom of speech is one I used to wholly believe in. And I used to believe that it was a left-leaning position to be wholly liberal when it comes to the freedom of speech and allowing different voices to speak, to being anti-censorship, to being anti-war. And the political climate has shifted where now the right is the freedom of speech party, or the right is, you know, on the political spectrum is for freedom of speech, is against censorship, is more anti-war than the left. Um, you know, so it just goes to show you that the political shift has happened, has affected me. And a lot of times I say for most issues, the left left me. And here is where I'm at. You know, even my old position as being pro-choice, we never steered away from that it's a baby. And now we've gone to a completely antenatal position of either claiming that it's just a clump of cells or going to the extreme of some of the Democrats are saying that abort until birth at any point. It's her body. She could do whatever she wants. Shout your abortions, right? You know, these are things that would have been distasteful 5 or so years ago, not that long ago. And now this is like a mainstream kind of sounding thing. You know, Stacey Abrams talking about abortion in such a cheap way and talking about life in such a cheap way. And this is like a pattern that's happened over and over. So in many ways, the left left me when it comes to that stuff. But I'm glad that there are publications that are willing to give me a voice. Actually, you know what? I'll correct something. Newsweek is still considered moderately left leaning.
Yes.
My editor with Newsweek, she considers herself a liberal. She's not a progressive. She's a liberal, and she loves having me writing on there. So I would say Newsweek is the only one when I really think about it.
Well, I personally believe that we need more healthy dialogue, and we need more people like your Newsweek editor.
At this point, I asked Adam if he had seen Elon Musk's post of a line graph showing where he used to be considered on the political spectrum versus where he is considered now without having made the move himself.
Yeah, actually, that image was actually created by a guy who's a scientist. I forget, was the evolutionary biologist, I believe. His name is Colin Wright,
Okay.
and Elon Musk shared it. Yeah, it made some waves and because of it, but it rang true for so many people. And I know so many people, especially like even Trump supporters. So many Trump supporters are former Democrats, and they don't catch on to this. And no one ever asks, well, why did these people leave our party? And they just say, well, they're racist and bigots, and that's why they left. Like, no, that's such a non-intellectual way of going about it. Just a simple question: what made these voters switch? And now it's to the point where they can go, you know, get out of here, and they never try to figure out where, you know, why they're going wrong. So why things are going wrong. That's why I think there's going to be a red wave this midterms, and probably if things continue the way they're going for 2024.
I read your article today, What Happened to the Anti-War Left? It was very well written. All of the articles that I have read of yours have been very well written. I think you're making a good career choice to focus on this because you are a good writer.
Thank you.
In that piece, you give a little bit of a history of your evolution. You actually mention Trump in that piece. Have you gotten much blowback from your friends and acquaintances and family for what I called your evolution or the party moving away from you? What kind of blowback have you got?
Not much. There were a few friends, like literally like 3 or 4 people, who I would identify as being either progressive or leftist, who separated from me in a relatively short period of time. Most of them before I even released my book. You know, one of them, as silly as it sounds, when Trump was talking about using bleach, right? And people were saying he wants people to drink bleach.
Right.
And I remember a friend of mine saying that, and I was like, that sounds insane. Trump said he wants people to drink bleach. So then I watched the video and I was like, actually, I replied to him. It was on Facebook. I was like, I just watched the video. That's not what he said. And he's like, well, he, yeah, he didn't say that, but, and I'm just like, he didn't say that. There's no but. Like, he didn't say that. Was he clear in what he was saying? No. Like it was like a weird transition. Like, wow, that was great. Wow, maybe we can look into using that inside the body somehow. That'd be great. I don't know. Like he's just saying whatever so he can transition to the next person. And your translation is he wants people to drink bleach. Like, that's such a stark difference. And by me pointing that out, and he even admitted that he didn't say that, he unfriended me and we haven't talked since. So
Wow.
I've taken the approach. I took the approach a long time ago. I'm not in the business of begging people to be my friend. I'm not in the business of appealing to people so they don't leave me or anything like that. I learned my lesson a long time ago, especially like surrounding relationships. So, I see it as if they want to separate from me, hey, it was good while it lasted, but I'm not willing to compromise myself to appease you so you don't leave me. Like, to me, I can do far better for myself by letting you go, right? Because obviously we're not mixing. And listen, I'll tell you this: for the few people that have left, I've gained far more from it by being open and honest and talking about things, and helping people. I've gained so much more. So those few people are relatively insignificant if they're willing to leave me because I pointed out something that is actually true and you admit that I was being truthful. That tells me you weren't really my friend in the first place. I was just someone who went along with what you thought, but I thought on a personal level that we connected, but I guess not. And I wouldn't have left him. Like, he could say a bunch of progressive leftist stuff, but if we're cool, we're cool. But some people are so heavily involved into politics that they're unwilling to look past their politics and look at the person.
I agree and understand that. You mentioned earlier what I call the myth. I don't know what else to call it, that that conservatism equates to racism.
Yeah.
I formed a not-for-profit called Conservatives versus Racism Incorporated to basically combat that myth so that we can get that off of the table and begin talking about issues. What has been your experience with conservatives? Is it your experience that the conservatives you have met and interacted with been racist?
Not at all. Overwhelmingly, I've been around way more conservatives in the past year and a half than I've ever been. And so, especially as someone who used to be a Democrat, when I look back, I'm like, I don't think I really even talk to any conservatives or Republicans. Like there were only maybe 2 or 3 people that I ever knew that they were Republicans that I personally knew or anything like that. And the rest of it was basically through the media. And then when I think about that, my exposure to conservatives and Republicans was filtered through a liberal media lens, liberal media filter. So I wasn't getting the authentic experience. I never talked to any conservatives. I wasn't around Republicans. I didn't know what they stood for outside of what I was told what they stood for. So, as you know, I've had a personal transformation that led up to me writing the book. But after publishing the book, the people who wanted to talk about this were conservatives mostly. And being around them, I went to America Fest last year in December. I got invited to go out there. All conservatives, a conservative convention, nothing but nice people. And I remember coming back and some leftist was showing a clip from that event. And they were like, it's a KKK rally. And I was like, man, that's the lamest KKK rally because nothing happened to me. Like, man, all these KKK rallies I keep going to, no one's ever tried to do anything negative to me. No one's ever spoken to me negatively. No one's tried to harm me. They've been very nice. They buy my book. They've been very cordial. Man, these are some really terrible KKK rallies that I've been going to. So, it's been really, really eye-opening. And it's been something that I'm like, man, I spent so long misunderstanding a large group of people. Are there, and I will always say this, there's no political side that has a monopoly on ignorance. Are there ignorant people who are on the right? Sure. Are there ignorant people on the left? Absolutely. Right. But this idea that it's just a one-sided thing, and that's why I write a lot about progressives, because we like to try and say like those tiki torch guys from Charlottesville, like they're the commonplace people. Like, so I can't tell you how many times conservatives have to bend over backwards to be like, we don't like those people either. When there was an event that was happening with Turning Points in Tampa some months ago, and there were some neo-Nazi looking guys who were outside. They were trying to get rid of them. They were said, we don't want you guys here.
Right.
And, so universally, nobody likes those people. But the difference between progressives is that progressives are the racists that have social power, who have social control. They dictate our movies. They dictate what kind of music gets put out. They dictate our television, the type of products that we buy, and the advertisement that we see, our schools, right? These are people who have social control within our country, and they're coming from a racist bent, right? So whether it's appearing anti-white or whether it's being condescending to people who are not white, I see a lot of that. I see a lot of elitism that's wrapped up in it, right? So that to me is far worse than the boogeyman of some tiki torch, skinhead dudes who are walking down the street one time in the past decade. Like, that to me is far more important. Those guys have no social power, no social credit. Nobody likes them, right? They just show up, and everybody rejects them. Yet we're supposed to pretend that those people are a greater threat than the people who get to dictate what kind of products that we buy and what shows up on our television, and telling you that you must look at me, a Black male, in a form of pity. And we must do everything possible to save these people, right? It's so condescending, and it comes from a racist place. And that is why I write a lot, especially for the New York Post. I write often about these racist, condescending, elitist progressives, because they need to be called out.
Another of the criticisms of the Republican Party, and I identify primarily as a conservative, not a Republican. The progressives have used the term for years, big tent, and that the right does not have a big tent. And I thought about that when you mentioned earlier that there are anti-war Republicans and pro-war Republicans. That seems a little more big tent than some people would like to lead you to believe. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's interesting that term Big Tent, as someone who used to be a Democrat, I know what that term really means. That term really means Big Tent in regards to identity, in regards to traits that you have no control over. So how many minorities you have, how many women are there, the LGBT, that's what they mean when it comes to Big Tent. They're talking about identity markers generally that people have no control over, or sexual identity markers. And that's what they're referring to wholly. And that's one of the reasons why I left the party, is because that's an incredibly superficial way to look at the world, and especially to look at politics. And I remember seeing it some years ago, but it just became more and more prevalent. And it became more and more socially acceptable. And now it's seemingly the platform. So the platform for the Democrat Party is a socially progressive platform. Politically might be a different story, but socially they are progressives. When Joe Biden is talking about LGBT rights, so on and so forth, and he's doing all of the things, and at no point do I think that Joe Biden is actually a progressive. But the platform is, we must appeal to that socially progressive base. We must do these things to gesture towards identity, to supposedly support the marginalized, right? To do all of these things. And I used to see it before as Democrats were for the marginalized, not necessarily specifically, but because they had good policies or they were just generally supportive. But now they're like going out of their way to appear that way. But the reality is that they're doing everything possible to hurt the very people that they say that they care about, or to use those identities as a, see, look what we've done. We've helped someone who's marginalized. Look at what we've done. It's become the party of the elite progressive, and they're dictating everything. And now it's to the point where they've backed themselves into a corner because nobody thinks it's a good, like most Americans are apolitical. If you were to take someone who doesn't watch CNN every day, who doesn't watch Fox News every day or anything like that, and you just ask them, hey, do you agree with cutting off the body parts of children? They'd be like, no, that's insane, right? No rational person would think that's a good idea. And if you were to ask this question 3 years ago, people would say you're insane. No, you don't cut the body parts off of children. But here we are today, where now we're supposed to be okay with this. We're supposed to be okay with pornography in schools. We're supposed to be okay with all of this very extreme stuff. And I keep going back to Virginia. Virginia's governorship went red, Republican, overwhelmingly, wasn't even close. That is the indicator of how things are going. And that was a social movement that was of parents who got out there and voted for someone who was going to help to stop this madness within their schools. And whether people want to say it or not, you hear like CRT isn't happening in schools, they're not teaching this. It is happening. It's happening everywhere. It's literally happening in every state. And whether how impactful it is in your school district is a different story. But I'll tell you, as a New Jersey citizen, Governor Murphy, in the middle of the pandemic, signed law that starting in middle school, they must teach LGBT education. Starting in middle school, which means they must have conversations about sexuality starting in middle school. This is a problem. And that is why, this is one of those reasons why Governor Murphy almost got removed from office by someone who didn't even campaign, and the rest of the state went red in our legislature. So Democrats have backed themselves into a corner, and there's going to be a red wave coming to pay for all of these progressive moves that nobody likes.
Well, Adam, I greatly appreciate your time tonight. You are a very articulate and thoughtful man.
Thank you.
I give all of my guests this opportunity to make a final statement. Say anything that you would like to say that I have not asked you, any overarching thoughts. The floor is yours to say whatever you like, not answer any questions, just share from the heart.
I want people to live their lives in the fullest way and become a positive impact in the world. You know, as much insanity as, you know, if you're on social media, as much as the world seems crazy, go outside, talk to people. And I recognize that even the stuff that I write, I feel comfort to know that some of these people that I write about, thankfully, are the minority. And I know that Americans overwhelmingly are good people. They're middle of the road, good people who just want the opportunity to take care of their family, to make enough money, to make ends meet, and not have the government overwhelmingly try to dictate how they do things. And I think there's so much that we can find some sort of middle ground on. And we should actually see it as a blessing that we do have conflict politically, that there is a conflict of left ideas or right ideas to find some sort of balance in between. Because I've seen countries that don't have this balance and they just run with it. There are countries in Western Europe that have socialist parties and they call themselves socialists and they just run with it. It's just a matter of how far left are they? What crazy thing that can we implement now? What, you know, overreaching policy can we put into place? And thankfully here we have things like states' rights. We have a vast nation with people who live in different areas, who have different viewpoints, see the world differently. And we're able to kind of argue our way through problems. So I actually think that us having conflict is a good thing, because if we just had one particular way and we just streamline down that way, we become off balance and we go towards a direction that's not good. We know what a nation looks like when it's too conservative, right? There are nations that are in the Middle East that are too conservative. Right. And we know what countries look like when they go too liberal and become progressive and become socialist, communist. So we know what happens when there isn't that balance in between. So I think our country is a great nation. And we found a way to keep the conflict so we can battle out ideas. We're occasionally going to implement good ideas and bad ideas and find some way through it. But not every country can say that they've had the same constitution as long as we've had.
Well, thank you for those final thoughts. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to visit with me tonight. And I wish you the absolute best in this new venture, the new part of your career.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it.